You're ready, Dr. Shepard.
I guess I'm gonna have to be. It's no rest for the weary, I think. Let's see. Welcome back to this meeting of the CASAC Ozone Panel for the purpose of deliberating on our consensus comments and letter to the administrator, which we developed after our September discussion of the 2020 Ozone ISA. At the end of our meeting yesterday, we had worked our way through most of the consensus comments, ending with a discussion of Appendix 8. Today, I want to make sure we have completed our discussion of Appendix 8 before we begin our discussion of Appendix 9. Then we will circle back to the topics we flagged in our consensus comments for offline revisions and discuss the proposed changes. Once we have completed our review of the consensus comments, we will start with the letter. Aaron and I have made an effort to bring into the letter our changes from the consensus comments yesterday. So I will try to highlight those along with other suggestions I made in my document circulated before yesterday's meeting. One comment that I want all panel members to consider in our discussion is whether our advice about future reviews adequately clarifies and highlights topics that we think should be brought into the rest of the ozone reconsideration. Please consider this as we review the remaining text, and please comment on this topic while we're in a public meeting so that we can make sure that we can incorporate that appropriately in our written materials. All right, so are there any questions or comments before we begin? Okay, seeing no hands up, I want us to go back to Appendix 8, which we had proposed some changes in the last. I think the most important thing was the last sentences, the last three sentences, lines 23 to 26. And currently they read, third, the W126 metric and the primary standard of the 3-year average of the fourth highest 8-hour average ozone concentration capture different features of the ozone distribution. The CASAC finds that the scientific evidence supports consideration of a distinct secondary standard, level, form, and averaging time. This affirms and repeats previous CASAC advice on the PA on June 26, 2014. So I think that's where we are. And I see Jim has his hand up. So go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so I went back and looked at what we talked about yesterday, and I'm good with what you just read. There's many options available for setting the secondary standard, and I do think a distinct secondary standard should be considered going in the policy assessment. So I just wanted to make it clear that we're not recommending a distinct secondary standard at this point, because that really is a policy discussion, but I definitely agree that it should be considered in the policy assessment. So if that's what we're saying, then I'm good with it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I makes that point more clearly. So I think in that sense, it's better to put it in than to assume it's implicit.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. And it came up yesterday. Should we say anything about the Lee publication being used in the reconsideration? That was mentioned by one of the public commenters, and I wanted to ask the experts in this group if there's any edits to this consensus comment that you would want to make that explicit, or whether we just leave it as it currently is written. I think we actually say in a future ISA is what the edit it now says online. So many documents open. I have to find the one that has the right line numbers. Where is it? It's the bottom of page, the sentence on line 43, the bottom of page 13. we changed this research needs to be included in a future ISA is what we say now. I guess the question is whether it should also be a part of the reconsideration. Howie, are you going to help us with that?
No, I was going to refer to the previous paragraph of just a minor wordsmithing thing.
Okay,
Um,
go ahead.
okay, thanks. I was going to, I'm glad to hear what Jim was saying about supporting this secondary standard. I thought I remembered someone, maybe Mark, it might have been you, I'm not sure, but it was someone that just said logically that maybe the word third should be replaced by consequently. I know that
Yes.
sounds really minor, but it seems to make that paragraph flow better.
Okay, and that was, I had that in my notes. I was thinking of bringing that up. So yeah, we'll make that change too.
Okay, and then I'm okay with that after that, so.
Thank you. What about, do we say anything different? Right now, we explicitly ask that the Lee study be addressed in a future ISA. Is there any reason to ask that it be part of the current reconsideration, or we can change it to a future review and let EPA interpret it as they see fit? Under the assumption that a future review includes this reconsideration, which in my mind it does, because it hasn't been finished yet.
I would have them do it now, yeah.
Okay, so you would recommend that instead of saying this research needs to be included in a future ISA, you would have either change it to review or change it to this reconsideration.
Yeah, because this has been going on for almost 10 years now. If we make it a future one, we just keep kicking the can down the road.
Okay, so the edit we made yesterday to a future ISA, we're going to change to this reconsideration. Maybe this reconsideration and future ISAs.
In case it doesn't get
whatever. Whatever.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, any further comments from anyone on this appendix?
So Leanne, when you say needs to be included in this reconsideration, do you mean the PA?
Yeah.
Because that could be reinterpreted to be reopening the ISA. You can say this research needs to be included in the PA and future ISAs.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. We certainly don't, I mean, we say very explicitly, we haven't talked about this language yet, but we say very explicitly, we're not asking to reopen the ISA, but anything we don't want to sort of act like we're contradicting ourselves in the details. So thank you for that. Terry.
Yeah, we're still on Appendix 9, yes?
We're still on Appendix 8. We're about to start Appendix 9.
Never mind.
I'm just giving people a few minutes to make sure that we've got all our bases covered. And I'm not seeing any of my experts on this topic sort of telling me much of anything. So I'm going to assume silence means assent. And so I think we're ready to move on to Appendix 9. And let's see where we're at with Appendix 9. So that is on the document page 14 and 15. And it's all, there's 2 discussion points and the answers are just kind of all under one response. There were let's see, there were a couple of suggestions in the letter, excuse me, the document that was distributed on Monday morning that I want to summarize before I open it up. Page 14, lines 37 to 39. We propose revising the sentence to read relative to that reported in the 2020 ISA. Is this the right? Yes, it is. Sorry, I'm a little bit lost. Right. Relative, page 14, line 37 to 39, relative to that reported in the 2020 ISA, which was based on the 5th assessment report of the Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, AR5 IPCC 2014. The role of tropospheric ozone on the climate system is restated with more confidence than the 6th assessment report, AR6 IPCC 2021 is already. And I open it up for any general discussion now. Terry, you took your hand down. Did I address your comment? Oh, you're putting it back up.
Yeah. So page 15, line 3.
Okay.
It's 0.1 to 0.3 degrees since 1750. Is that really 270 years worth?
That
Judy, you were going to answer.
that is, yeah, that is both in the AR6 and AR5. It is true, although they did show that it was an uncertainty for the pre-industrial time period.
Because if it's 270 years, it doesn't seem to be that important to me. And I would assume
maybe I
that
can help out a
happened
little
in the
bit.
last 100
Yeah,
years.
right.
And this is that's the whole challenge with climate change in general, right? Go ahead, Jason.
Well, the temperature changes from today to the pre-industrial period. The temperature change from 1750 to about 1900 is considered minimal. Most of the temperature change that we've seen has been in the last 4 decades, so since 1980 or so. That total temperature change is, according to the IPCC, put forward as just over 1 degree Celsius. So this would be to say, what is the contribution of ozone to that temperature change? Does that make sense?
Yes, it was just in terms of 1750. I just got lost in ozone back in 1750, how'd they know it? I guess it was all modeling. It just seemed a little nebulous going that far back.
Yeah, so then ozone's contribution is determined in part by modeling, but there are some observations from the 1800s, and then there's this new thing where they're looking at oxygen isotopes in ice cores to infer how much ozone was present, and that helps to constrain it. But yeah, modeling is part of that picture for the pre-industrial.
So you're implying that if climate change is 1 degree, that 0.3 or maybe a third of it could be from the ozone?
Yeah.
I guess that could be stated a little more. Or yes, stated more strongly. That's all.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point.
So we should talk about that in public unless you think that's minor wordsmithing, in which case we can do that offline. Judy, you still have your hand up.
Oh. No, I'm going to take it down. Forgot.
Okay. Howie, are you going to help us with this?
You just wanted to confirm, maybe Jason can confirm it, but if I recall that tropospheric ozone is the third most important greenhouse gas in terms of forcing. So yeah, I think even if that's a 0.1 to 0.3 degree rise, that's on a global basis, that's pretty significant.
Can we say that directly? I mean, maybe it's said in the ISA and those of us who are not expert in this area missed it, but it seems like you're making an important point that I mean, Terry's question, highlighted that it's lost on some of us without the expertise that you all have.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be strengthened. That's impressive. I didn't get that from reading it.
Yeah, because
Can
you
we-
have CO2, then you have methane, and then I think the third one in terms of forcing is tropospheric ozone.
Right, that's correct.
Going back to what Jason said earlier about most of that change has occurred in the last 4 decades, can we just put that in there? Since 1950, parentheses, most of this has occurred in the last 4 decades, or something along that lines, because I think that really does help better understand that most of this change is recent and not really from 200 years ago.
That sounds like a good suggestion as well. We're getting several clarity edits that whether we can do on the fly or whether we need to circle back to this, I'll defer to others. Mark.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. Today is a public meeting, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, and Aaron can clarify for us, so we don't wander into territory we don't belong. But I think things that are considered more wordsmithing and clarity, if we can do offline later. We can't do anything of substance or anything that changes the meaning or our advice. So Aaron, do you want to help me with this? So I don't.
Sure. So with regards to that sentence, if you guys generally agree to clarify it to, what your intent is with that sentence, that's fine. You don't need to wordsmith that now. As long as everyone's in agreement, they know what you're going to change and how you're going to change it roughly, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Jim.
Oh, no. Oh, I guess I had one clarification. I know we said ozone was the third most important pollutant. I don't think we included water vapor in the list, so would it really make it the fourth most important pollutant?
I would say the third most important anthropogenic greenhouse gas.
Okay, so if we're adding that, we can make that clarity.
Yeah, that would be the right way to say it.
Okay, so just to be clear, Leanne, is Jason tasked with this?
Jason, are you tasked with this?
That's okay with me, yeah.
Yeah, you're obviously the best qualified, so
But we'll hear from the others too.
Yeah. I mean, you're more than welcome to vet it, and I encourage you actually to vet it with your colleagues who are also expert in this area, because it will strengthen it, I'm sure. And the best job we do still is better when the rest of us chime in. Thank you. Michael.
Yes, I didn't read the climate change section that well. So I'm just wondering if this point is not made in the ISA, but we want it to be considered in the PA, should we state that specifically?
Yeah, I'm going to ask those of you who read this section more carefully if you're able to answer Mike's question.
I guess one question was really, what was our recommendations really for future ISAs or for the policy assessment, I guess is the question. And I think at the last part of it, I think we clearly stated that. But yeah, I guess we're talking about the top part of the section. And I'm not sure, so.
Yeah, and I at least my interpretation of this was that we were focused on future reviews, not specific to the reconsideration. Because I don't think any of the climate made it into the policy assessment. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. It basically, the policy assessment said the uncertainties were too great to evaluate it, therefore it was not evaluated. So I don't think anything we're adding here is not going to change that conclusion. So I would recommend future ISAs.
Okay. Well, at the moment, our text reads, and did I not summarize that? I suggested on lines, if I didn't say this, I'll say it now. On lines 5 and 23, we're going to insert the words "in future reviews." And as I mentioned earlier, that's what the language we've been using in this document, which could be interpreted to include the reconsideration, but in my mind, that's EPA's discretion as to whether they feel like they want to include it, but we're not telling them that they have to do it in the reconsideration, that it's just that's something they're going to do in a future review, which could include the reconsideration, but often presumably would be a future ISA.
I'll say it was, I think, Judy that wrote that. And her intention is that in the AR6, it's now 19% higher than it was in the 2020 ISA. And the 2020 ISA was based on AR5. So maybe we just need a reference to AR6 in the first part of that sentence to clarify that's where that.
Yeah, that might work.
Say that
Okay.
again, Judy.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, that would be helpful.
Okay, so I'll take the lead in suggesting text for that sentence and then the next paragraph, the beginning of the next paragraph.
Okay.
And
All right,
run it
thanks.
by others.
Okay, there was one place later on where it said etc. I didn't know if we could put more specificity or remove that. And what line is that on? The paragraph that starts, "There is strong evidence." It's on line
Oh yeah.
14. That's a detail, but if that would be another clarification, maybe you could edit. Or leave it if you think etc. is the right word there. It just seemed kind of gratuitous to me without.
And other forcings would
Okay.
be fine instead of etc.
Okay.
So that would include like land use change.
Well, that's good, because I was going to add "and other gases," but that sounds like that's wrong. I mean, because land use change is clearly not a gas.
Right. So and other forcings, I think, would be good.
Okay, good. Thank you. Anything else for Appendix 9?
Just one suggestion, based on what we said before. On line 13, would this be an appropriate place to put in ozone, one of the third most important anthropogenic climate forcing agents?
Sounds like
Yeah, that sounds good.
yeah.
Third most important anthropogenic climate forcing agent.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think we should clarify that it's tropospheric ozone, not the stratospheric ozone.
Yeah. Good point.
And among the gases, right? To not include black carbon mixed in with that.
It's more important than black carbon.
Okay. So it's still number, whatever number it is. Okay.
3.
Number 3.
What number is black carbon? This is off topic, but since we're talking about it, what number is that?
I don't know. Then would come the CFCs and black carbon, but I don't know the order.
Yeah.
Yeah, black carbon is kind of, is highly variable, and it's a lot lower than the tropospheric ozone. At least in the latest IPCC thing that I read.
Okay. All right, well, that's off topic, but thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to circle back now. Does everybody agree with that? Let's see, I have so many documents with different things in them open. So let's go back to what we flagged. And I think we're starting with a topic that we flagged for Jeremy to take the lead on editing. This was in appendix 1 and 2. Jeremy, you're welcome to chime in now if you're on top of it. Otherwise, I'll find where it is in the printed document. And
Yeah, let me just let me try to pull this up quickly.
yeah, and while you're,
Leanne, excuse me, are we allowed to share screen?
I think so. What would you like? You would like to see like the draft text?
It would be more efficient, I think, than reading.
Okay. Aaron or Will, can you arrange? I think we want to share the screen that is, or Jeremy's going to be co-host. So, Jeremy, do you want to share you were going to share your screen? There you go. Okay.
Okay, there you go. Okay. So this was the revisions to specific sections of the response to appendices 1 and 2. And for this first one, the first paragraph here, let me remind myself. Okay, right. So there was discussion yesterday about how
Jeremy, can you zoom in a little bit more? Because it's hard to see. Thank you.
Is that good?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, also, just to clarify, in case anybody chooses to bring it up, Aaron sent this document to us right before the meeting. I know not all of us can deal with all this real-time new information at once, but if you need to look at it on your own screen, you have it. Go ahead, Jeremy.
For those watching on the live webcast, it's on our meeting webpage. It's under 11:15:22 preliminary comments from Dr. Sarnat.
Thank you, Aaron.
Okay, and this is just my attempt at draft revision of what was written. So definitely open to further suggested edits. One of the things I tried to do here was actually to take out some of the questionable language relating to precursors and unreacted components. And I think that there was also some question about the content or the text that begins with similarly. And here there was what I tried to do was to include text to say that using stationary ambient ozone also has its limitations. So we're kind of restoring some of the balance between the limitations in ozone exposures within CHE designs, and also saying that other relevant lines of evidence and exposure assignment methods contain their respective limitations too, and that therefore the CASAC feels we should use a balanced approach with regard to considering varying lines of evidence. That's all I think I originally wanted to say with that last clause or those last sentences there. I hope that this was responsive to some of the comments yesterday, but certainly, again, open to further revisions.
George Allen, you have your hand up.
Just a minor comment I made yesterday in the middle there, similarly, maybe conversely, because that next section is flipping it around just to make it more clear.
Mm-hmm.
minor point, but when I read it, it's much easier to make sense of it.
So ozone noted by the CASAC should be rightly viewed as the designated exposure of total exposure to complex pollutants which employ ozone. Okay.
Well, similarly, it is possible that ozone measured at stationary.
And you want to change it to conversely.
Conversely, because it's flipping it around.
Yeah, that's acceptable to me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and we talked about that yesterday, so that seems like we should incorporate that too. Jim Boylan.
Oh, yep. So I had some comments on this earlier, but this rewrite has addressed my comments. So I'm in favor of the rewrite.
Yeah, I think that there was also some question about what does the indoor microenvironments have to do with this? And yeah, I can appreciate that.
Yeah, I think actually you did a real nice job, Jeremy. Thank you.
You?
Okay, so one of the topics checked off, it looks like. And you may want to keep sharing your screen because you're next on page.
Again? Okay. Yeah. So
Let's see, we're we're still in the same section on appendices 1 and 2, and now we're talking about the text that started on line 22. Thanks, go ahead.
okay, so here, these revisions are in response to points raised yesterday about why panel studies are actually mentioned in the summer camp studies and all that kind of stuff. And so initially the text that's in strikeout right now was added to directly respond to one of the charge questions. But I don't think that that's really, and basically it was that, well, there's nothing about the panel studies right now within the ISA that specifically address discrepancies or concordance between the CHE and EPI studies. That's basically what I think we originally put in here. Rather, I kind of revised this and I spoke about the potential that panel studies, because of their of specific idiosyncrasies in their design, in that they sit in between observational EPI designs and CHE studies in some sense. They actually may offer insights into similarities and differences in the health effects findings, so that future ISAs may want to look to panel designs and see if they do actually kind of explain either discrepancies or similarities in the findings. When I just said that right now, it didn't seem so clear, but I hope that what I wrote is a little bit clearer.
Michelle, you have your hand up.
I do. So I like what you're saying, Jeremy, and I agree. I'm wondering if we can tweak the first line a little bit. So when it says human panel studies are typically conducted in real world settings, that's true. But that just means, I mean, that could be said of many other types of study designs as well. And so I'm wondering if an uninformed reader might think that that's something special about human panel studies and not a lot of other epidemiological studies. I think maybe a minor tweak of that. Human studies are one of the study designs typically conducted in real world settings, or maybe you can come up with something better. I realize I'm being kind of nitpicky at this point.
No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, we can change it. I think that what I was trying to do here, which obviously didn't come across so clearly, was that the panel studies are not only that they conducted in real world study, but they also kind of use these quasi-controlled, elements, which that's what makes it unique. Not that they're conducted in real world settings, but I hear what you're saying. If anyone wants to, or Michelle, if you want to revise it in some way.
Yeah. So Catherine.
I think, maybe just morphing the sentence to put the employed quasi-controlled protocols first. So human panel studies employ quasi-controlled protocols and are conducted,
I like that.
that just puts the emphasis on
Yeah.
the difference.
I like that
sounds
as
good.
well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mark?
Any wordsmithing or mistakes in my grammar, I definitely appreciate people calling that out for sure.
Yeah, I like this paragraph. It certainly clarifies the issue, and I think it's an interesting hypothesis and worth exploring. My wordsmithing is the last sentence, and it just where it says future ISAs may choose to look specifically at the results from ozone-related panel studies. The part that bothers me as they may explain differences in design. So I don't think it's the differences in designs, it's the differences in the findings.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. I think that,
so I don't know exactly how to change that, but maybe wordsmithing that a little bit.
As they may explain
the different
finding among various study designs or health effect study designs, as they may explain differences in findings among various health effect study designs.
I like that.
Aaron, are you getting this, or am I supposed to be getting this and I'm not?
Aaron should be getting it. Yeah, we're relying on him. Too many other things for us to stay on top of. I have one question for you, Jeremy. You dropped any attention to summer camp studies. Was that no?
Yeah, I kind of played with like saying human panel studies, including, we could say, the clause, including summer camp studies are typically, or however we rephrased it, or employ quasi-controlled, design. So that does explicitly respond to that charge question, or that part of the charge question. I kind of thought it was a little bit odd originally that the summer camp studies in particular were brought up, but
I like this better.
It's fairly important, but
Okay. All right, we'll just leave it. It sounds like Christina. You're still muted, Christina. There you go.
Oh, I didn't hear you calling me.
Oh,
all right.
Sorry.
So I just think in the last sentence to be a little more direct and replace may choose to look and just say we suggest that, or future ISAs should, because this is really, advice that we think should be taken.
So the word should is like a recommendation. And what I'm hearing is this is more of a suggestion. Is that?
I would say, suggest. We suggest future ISAs look specifically at.
Mark.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is kind of an exploratory topic. And Jeremy, contradict me if that was not your intent, but I kind of like not being that specific for them. I mean, maybe, I think this is an interesting idea that is worth exploring. And I think that's what we're trying to say. And I like the phrasing may choose to look. That for me is kind of even weaker than suggest. And it gives them the option to explore this and either include it or not, depending on how productive it is. I prefer leaving it as it is, but I don't feel real strongly about it.
Yeah, right. And I kind of agree, Mark, that I do agree. I should be about this. I'm not sure if they inform this specific issue or not. But I think there's more that can be done with the literature from panel studies. And EPA could look to that, So yeah, I think I'm okay. I went back and forth. I went back and forth on, what words to use. I actually think I did have suggest. I had recommend as well, and I went with this may choose to look. But I don't
Okay.
know either. No.
So I'm hearing, let's leave it as is. It certainly, it suggests is within may choose to look. I mean, it's just a stronger version of that. So it's the judgment call on EPA's part. Are we done with this topic then? There'll be some.
Could we use the word consider instead of look?
Sure.
Look,
Yeah. So that would be choose to consider specifically the results.
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Christina.
So, I mean, would prefer the stronger language, because why would we be mentioning it if we're just saying you can, you cannot? It's kind of up to you, but I'm not going to protest it. But I think the stronger language is more, if we're stating it, it should be important for them to really consider looking at. But it's okay if it doesn't say that.
Yeah, I'm hearing that because it may or may not be a productive investigation, we don't want to be too strong in our language.
Right, but you don't know if it's productive unless you actually look at it.
Right. Yeah.
I think they'll consider it if maybe I'm naive, but I think they'll consider it even if we phrase it like this.
Okay, I think we're done with this one. And
Yeah,
we're
so
ready to, you can stop sharing because we're going to come back to you later. The next topic flagged is the whole beginning of the health effects overarching comments section, which Ed graciously volunteered to take the lead on. And Aaron shared that. Ed, do you want to share the screen, or we can probably ask somebody?
I think probably it makes more sense to have you or Aaron share the screen, because there've been a couple of improvements, I think, since the version I sent out.
Oh, you haven't gotten that one yet. Okay.
Oh, no, I could, let me see, I can pull it up.
Well, that's all right. I think, let's see if I have it up.
So it's on the website, it's 11/15/22 preliminary comments from Mr. Ed Aval.
And Mark and Jennifer had later comments.
Right,
Later.
and so did Mike and Leanne. So
Yes.
there's been a couple of changes.
Right. So here I'm sharing the version that's on the website, which I think is the official version we need to talk about. Maybe I could add, can everybody see that? Is that good size and everything? So it's a rewrite up to line 37 that Ed did, and then I reviewed it and decided that, as I understood our conversation yesterday, we needed to address a second aspect to controlled human exposure studies, which was actually in there. So I just pretty much pulled from the previous text that was already there. It's a little bit duplicative. So that's what this from line 39 down is. Maybe Ed, do you want to give us a overview of what you were thinking? Somebody's got their, somebody needs to mute themselves.
So I think that the issue, as I recall yesterday, was that we had a listing basically, and not a clear explanation or consideration of the two issues that were mentioned. One, the issue about the potential differences between CHE and EPI studies, strengths and weaknesses, and then again this issue about detection of adverse effects. and lowest level, or how one determines where that is or isn't. And so the front couple of paragraphs I attempted to rewrite to sort of include the position that there are several different approaches that could be used, including CHE, controlled exposures, and epidemiological studies, as well as actually, toxicology and other work. But they all have some strengths and weaknesses. And I think then focusing in on particularly controlled exposure studies, their advantages, but also their shortcomings, and why we would look to the epi studies to fill in some of those informational gaps that we just can't really address in controlled chamber work. And so that was the paragraphs up through about line 31, I guess. And then I made a sort of a universal, a more global comment about from line 33 to 37 that, we should look at all of these things to sort of build the strongest database from which to draw interpretations. And then line 39 forward are the ones that that Leanne and contributed, and it is before you now. Again, it is somewhat, I personally feel it is somewhat duplicative, but I don't feel so strong about that I'm going to fight over it. So I think it's fine to accept it. As Leanne pointed out, it's better to say too much and repeat it than to not say it and have it missed. And so I think that, concerns about how to think about these things at low concentrations here, that, here's a summary again of why one can't just, or one should not necessarily just look at controlled exposure data findings to conclude what might or might not be happening at the very lowest of concentrations. So other than that, again, there were a couple of comments from my colleagues that made some changes, and happy to hear others. I don't know, Leanne, if you want to call on people, or I see Jeremy's got a comment.
Yeah, I'll call on people, and Jeremy, you're next. Thank you, Ed, for that summary. I appreciate it.
Can you scroll up just a bit to the 30, the 37? Yeah. So 33 to 37. Actually, I'm sorry, the 27. So I would say, however, I don't know if I'm so comfortable with they often do not or cannot, or even I would say, however, they often are limited in their treatment of confounding, of many of the confounding variables. They are limited in their treatment. They often do not or cannot address. I'm not sure that's necessarily. I think, many of the population-based epi studies do make some attempt to address confounding, especially the ones that you list here in the parentheses, but there's limitations in those approaches. I don't want to unnecessarily malign, the traditional epi methods that have been used.
Yes. And I would also emphasize that now with the newer novel confounding adjustment methods, I think is the word we're using officially, we're doing better at that also. So that's another reason to go with your suggestion. Jim.
I had a comment on the same section, and I saw Jennifer Peel actually sent an email suggesting taking out the very last part that says leading to possible determinations of association rather than causality. And if she wants, she could talk about that, but I was going to offer alternative language. And what I would be recommending is leading to possible overestimations of ozone effects, which is really, I think, the point we're trying to get to here. Later on, we talk about CHEs underestimating possible ozone effects. And so I think that for the reasons Jennifer made good comments, that it's really not about causality from a single study, but I would recommend leading to possible overestimations of ozone effects. instead of the last part.
Well, we're probably going to get some pushback on that because I think those of us who know about the strengths and weaknesses of epi studies could give you lots of reasons why they may underestimate effects as well as overestimate them. So,
But we're talking about confounding variables and copollutants, which
yeah, but
would-
confounding can go in either direction. I mean, confounding can cause you to overestimate something, be biased in either direction, basically. So you can't just say that because it's confounding, it's in one direction. And that's probably maybe what Jennifer's going to say. So let's hear from what Jennifer's.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think it's hard to say anything definitively in terms of direction. So I think we should just, my recommendation was to just eliminate leading to possible determinations of association rather than causality, and just end the sentence after the parentheses. Because I think we're just pointing out the limitations, and then, all of this is about how we evaluate evidence for causality. So all of this would be taken into account when you're evaluating causality. And I think I had a similar recommendation. Let me just point it out here. Above, in line 17 to 18, when I'm talking about CHE studies, I would suggest removing that can lead to causal implication determinations.
I think that's fine. Jennifer, I didn't get a chance to see your comments, your written comments, so I can't speak to them. But the reason why I included that last sentence on causality and association was the previous discussion yesterday, and the inference from what is concludable, I guess, from controlled chamber studies compared to what epidemiology can offer. And I just wanted to make it clear in the review that we do acknowledge that there's a limit to what epi can do, although it can be powerful in what it can do.
Yeah, and I see others jumping in here, and I'll just respond to that quickly. And Ed, I should have started by saying this was a fantastic document. Thank you for rewriting this. But, I think, again, that would be leading into one of these blanket statements. It's kind of implying that if you only have epidemiology, you could never conclude causality, right? Regardless of how strong that epidemiology evidence is. And that's why I was trying to adjust those two statements and just get rid of those blanket statements again.
What if we said going the last sentence, instead of taking the last part out, leading to possible biases in ozone effects? I mean, it sort of feels like we need to say where this leads us. And taking the last part out is the first part.
Are you on line? You talking about line 18?
He's talking about line 30.
31. Yeah.
I thought we were back on line 18.
We were.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We were on both. I mean, we
yeah, we jumped around a little bit. Well, I was just going to ask Jennifer why she wanted to take that out, and then she explained it. And maybe I like keeping it in because I think the idea is that the CHE studies, because they're a controlled experiment, do have causal implications. But maybe we can tweak the language so that it's not seeming to be exclusionary of epi studies. We could say that concentration response data that can strengthen causal implications or something along those lines.
So you're suggesting replacing lead to with strengthen.
Yes. Or contribute to or something along those lines.
I like contribute to.
Okay. Going with that at the moment. Christina.
Okay. Yeah, I was reflecting on Jennifer's suggestion for removing that sentence, the last part of the sentence on line 30. But using the language that was just proposed seems like a good option. So I just want to make sure that we're very careful that, you know, we are not thinking so specifically about this as experts that we kind of don't understand how it all reads. And sometimes it may seem like we are saying that epidemiologic studies are not very valid to include at all, given that we are underpinning all of the issues with them. It also makes it seem like they're not worth as much to be included. I just want to make sure that we're careful not to do that and say how each is valuable, although they each have limitations. So maybe the language that Mark just posed might be a way of tweaking it a little bit. So it does contribute something here, but not necessarily to the causality.
All right, thank you. I think that's a good reminder that, and that's something I've been really trying to pay attention to in general with this entire document is what's kind of the message that's coming through when you step back from all the details. And so I appreciate that reminder because that's really important for us to have in our minds. Jeremy.
Yeah, and maybe just to underscore, this, Christina's last comment and yours too, Leanne, I think that maybe we're getting a little bit muddled here between thinking of, the causal inference framework and, different discussions about what that means and what contributes, to that framework or to establishing causality, and then causal determination status in the context of the ISA or the PA. So I actually, and they're quite different. I mean, I understand your point, Mark, that, the CHE, the controlled human exposure studies, might be able on individual levels or as a specific line of evidence, they're designed, to get at, some aspects of causality in ways that the epi studies are not. But that's not really what we're trying to say. I mean, and it certainly, it is not true in terms of like what we think about the use of varying lines of evidence and the weight of evidence, the collective weight of evidence in terms of establishing causality. And I just don't want us to kind of wade into that discussion here, which I'm afraid we might be with the use of this, the causality language here. We had this discussion actually quite a bit in the PM CASAC. And I would like us to sort of retreat, here too from that, but I don't know, that's just my feeling.
And do you have any specific suggestions that address that, or because I'm not sure
can you tell me what? Okay, maybe I can, but I'm not sure exactly what we landed on in terms of the final language here for this section.
Yeah, let me see if I can do that. And maybe I wasn't taking notes on that because I'm sharing my screen. I can't take notes on the document too. Let's see, maybe others can help me. We were talking about in sequential order, line 18, the sentence that says CHD studies can provide unique insights regarding mechanism of effects and concentrations that can lead to causal implication determinations. And the wording that we moved to was contribute to. And then the second thing that we were talking about changing.
Just let's stop here for a sec. So
okay, sure.
Leave the causal implication determinations. I don't like that at all. I mean, so, I'm sorry, Ed, but we have the causal determinations, which is very unique language that EPA uses. And then, is that what we're talking about here, or is it just on a macro level? I'm kind of confused here about what we're trying to get at. I mean, there is like a macro level of what causal determination, what causal inference is about. And then on a micro level, we're talking about this specific process and causal determination and what contributes towards that. So I don't know. It seems like we're getting confused here.
Mark, are you going to help us navigate this?
No, I was just going to say that I'm now confused. I'm not sure I understand your concern, Jeremy. I mean, this paragraph is talking about the relative strengths and weaknesses of EPI and CHE. And so it's very general, and actually this stuff is in the preamble for the ISAs to some degree, although I think it bears re-emphasizing here. But so I think this wording is a fairly accurate summary of the general understanding of the strengths of CHE studies versus EPI studies. And it's just to point out, I mean, elsewhere in this section, we point out the importance of balance and of considering the EPI studies for the low concentrations, and we make that point, I think, repeatedly in our report. And here, I think we're just pointing out we don't want to lose one of the roles of the CHE studies is in contributing to the causal determination of a given pollutant. And here with ozone particularly, where, you know, ozone, if aside from the fact that it doesn't include the other oxidants, you can determine cause and effect in a CHE study with some degree of assurance. If you have, you know, repeated experiments and a well-designed and controlled study, whereas obviously the EPI studies are not controlled, at least not aside from the panel studies. So I guess, you know, I think we are getting into the causal implication. That's one of the strengths of CHE studies. The weaknesses are also described here. So I guess I'm not understanding the problem.
Okay, let me try to explain myself. And then when I can't, I'm going to turn it to Christina, okay?
And Christina's going to solve everything.
All right.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
I think what you're saying, Mark, and I agree with you, is that if we're looking at an individual study design, right, the CHEs are designed specifically to address the issue of causality, right? By design, that's, you know, and the elements of control, that's what they're geared towards, right? But that's not actually what we're talking about when we're talking about collective, you know, causal inference or causal determination. We're talking about the comprehensive weight of evidence from multiple lines of evidence, okay? In itself, on an individual level, an EPI study, you're right, is not designed to address the issue of causality. But collectively, the body of evidence across EPI designs and across EPI studies, you know, using different, you know, methods and specifications and models, they do themselves collectively contribute to the question of causality. So that's what I was inarticulately trying to say, like from a macro and a micro level.
Good. I'm sorry if I can jump in. So we're in a complete agreement on that. And I think if you take this whole section in total, that we say that repeatedly. This little paragraph is just kind of summarizing the various strengths and weaknesses of CHE studies, and elsewhere, you know, in other paragraphs, we do that for the EPI studies as well. And then we emphasize, I think, quite clearly the importance of doing just what you're indicating.
Right.
But I think we still need to point out that this is a strength of the CHE studies.
Okay, and I'm not sure why I responded to this section. If as you say, and I believe that it's true that there are other there's a language similar to this in other parts of the response. But I think when I read this, though, the implication here is that by comparison, other designs, specifically EPI designs, are not designed to get a causal implication determination or whatever that the language is here. So
Yeah, and that I think is what Jennifer's edits were, or the edits we were talking about were trying to address. And yeah, we don't want to send that message.
So I'm going to suggest, and then we'll turn it over to Christina, who may have a much better answer. We already agreed to change can lead to contribute to, and then I think the concern is about the three words causal implication determinations. As I was hearing the discussion, I think the word implication can be dropped because it's just not needed. And then the question I have is whether we leave it as determinations, which I see more as contributing to the whole weight of evidence conclusion that uses multiple study lines, or whether we should just say causal conclusions, because that's based on the narrower point that because controlled human exposure studies are randomized design studies, you can make causal inference from them based on their design. And so if that's really the point, maybe we should replace the word determinations with conclusions. So I'll leave you all to think about that. And I see Ed has, Christina, should we let Ed speak, or should we go to you next?
Yeah, I'll go next.
Okay.
So what you were just saying last, were you talking about changing the determinations that's in line 31 to conclusions?
No, I'm on we're still
you're
on
talking up
18 and 19.
18 and 19.
Yeah, we're on 18 and
oh
19.
Causal implication.
Yeah, the three words, causal implication determinations. I think Jeremy has pointed out that he doesn't know what that means. And, whether we're going to the broader causal determination framework thought, or whether we're going to the what can the study actually conclude in and of itself. The word should be different.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can do both with this, but we'd have to add more text, because when you're just reading it and kind of reading at it at a higher level, it's talking about the CHE studies and what they contribute and what they can't do. And then when you go to EPI studies, it just says what they can't do. It doesn't say what they can do. And so I think if we have a few sentences about what epidemiologic studies are able to do, in terms of determining associations and how those associations are included in the weight of evidence around causality, then it would seem a little more balanced to me.
Okay, thanks for that. Ed, since you wrote this, I think we do need to give you an opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you. I've been on mute because I have a police helicopter circling over me. And so I keep trying to keep it out of the noise. So I'll see if I can get it in between the cycles that are coming by. So a couple of comments. First, I agree with Leanne. It was headed towards conclusions, not determinations.
Okay. So then if we just
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I just turned it off because a helicopter circled again.
Yeah.
So one thing was I was talking about what could be concluded from the CHE studies within the context of these reviews, not sort of the global conversation that Jeremy was having. So I apologize for fumbling with the words. So I agree, conclusion would be better. Secondly, line 27 and 28, Christina, I think does address some of the advantages of EPI studies.
Okay, so yeah, I see you're selectively muting yourself to keep us away from the police helicopter. So what I'll speak now and watch for you to unmute, given I think you have maybe a little bit more to say. So I think that lines 18 to 19 in talking about CHE studies, provide unique insights, mechanism, effect, concentration that can contribute to causal conclusions. That's what I think we want to revise it to say. And I think that that helps resolve the lack of clarity, and hopefully it addresses Jeremy's concern. And because it is a feature of that study design that it can lead to a causal conclusion. And then we can revisit Christina's comment, whether there's enough about the strengths of EPI studies, recognizing that the paragraph on lines 27 to 31 is there to address that. So if we need to strengthen that, we should. And then I don't know if you wanted to say anything more, Ed, about this. We haven't gotten back yet to the discussion on the last paragraph. Jeremy.
Yes, so yeah, I think I'm fine with that. And I don't want to make too much of this, but I probably feel a little bit better at the beginning of line 17, or on line 17 at the beginning of the sentence, saying individual CHE studies can provide unique insights, which again takes it out of the global realm and like talks about the designs, the specific designs themselves. I think. I don't know.
Okay, anybody have a problem with inserting the word individual? Mark, you're waving. Are you waving for a reason?
I am, yeah. I don't get the adding individual. I mean, we're talking about study designs here. So why would we say an individual study?
Well, why don't we say the CHE study design? And if we wanted to lengthen it, I mean, we could say and the resulting individual studies. We really wanted to go there.
I just don't think it adds anything.
Okay.
I did say that I'm not going to make too big a deal out of it, but
okay.
I mean, maybe I'm not understanding what the issue is here, but
I think Jeremy's concerned that we're making too sweeping of a statement. Is that what I'm hearing, Jeremy?
it is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but I think we all agree that a CHE study allows causal inference, causal conclusions. May not be the conclusions we want, or may not be the data and the evidence we need to draw a causal determination. But it does a study, a CHE study by design allows for a causal conclusion about something.
Or contributes to it, for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the study itself, you can conclude based on the question they asked, you can make a causal statement. That's inherent in the study design.
Yeah, that's the point of this.
Yes. Go ahead, Michelle. I guess it sounds like you want to follow up on this point.
I don't want to interrupt people. I see Terry has a hand up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go.
Well, it's just that here we have a dozen, two dozen really smart scientists, and we're really getting picky, I think. It seemed like we're writing a review and losing sight of the audience, which I thought was EPA or the administrator. And I don't think we're writing a review. I think we've made a lot of the good points on the pros and cons of EPI and CHE. So I'm wondering why we're getting so picky, I guess, Leanne.
Okay, thank you. Well, we'll just keep going in order then. Christina, you're next.
So yes, I agree with what Terry was just saying, and we don't want to get too picky. However, when just looking at the paragraph around epidemiologic studies, I feel like just another sentence or two talking about that the determination of it, associations is important, because it just looks like, and yes, it does say that epi studies allow for a wider range of study participants over a longer time frame under range of real life activities. Yes, but they can address this and then it can address that, but it just doesn't say what they do. And I just think we need a balance there with a sentence.
Can you maybe think about that while we're talking and to propose that? Or do you have one already?
No, I don't have one already. I can think about it though.
We can probably, since we understand, and this is also something.
We can come back to it later.
Yeah, and I also think that based on what Aaron said earlier, we can do this offline because our intent is clear. Michelle.
Well, I think for this specific one, though, not because you don't exactly know the content, some may or may not agree. So,
all right. Thank you for keeping me in line. All right, so we need to flag that. Maybe we'll get back to it before we finish this section. Kath, wait a minute. I thought Michelle was next.
Yeah, I lowered my hand, trying to be efficient, and I messed things up. So I agree we don't want to nitpick, but I also think words matter. And this document hugely matters. You know, what EPA decides will affect millions and millions and millions of people. And I also was thinking about Christina's comment about how, what does it mean when we stress the strengths of some studies and not of others? I'm looking at the language can lead to causal implication determinations. And I hear what you're saying, Leanne, about there's some causality implications inherent in the design of the study, but I'm concerned about any language that suggests that this study is how you decide causality. So my suggestion is, instead of can lead to, can inform causal implications, I think that's more accurate and less open to misinterpretation and still captures our key point.
Yeah, we had changed it already from lead to contribute, which inform is sort of similar. And then
yeah, I thought people, maybe I got lost in our many different versions. I thought some people were suggesting we go back to lead to, or that contribute wasn't strong enough, but I'm fine with contribute to as well.
Okay. And then
I thought we'd ended up at excuse me, I thought we had ended up at contributes to causal conclusions.
That's correct. We had ended up on can contribute to causal conclusions.
Okay, I'm just sorry I missed that. Thank you. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. Catherine.
I agree with the overall sentiments here that this is really important. And again, going back to the perspective and the lens of the audience and the administrator and just, yeah, words do matter and clarity is really important here. I think to Christina's thoughts about enriching the part about the EPI studies, I think, saying something there that is balanced in the terms of, we talk about uniqueness of the CHE design, but maybe, the unique strengths of the EPI studies and some of the things listed there, as well as, answering questions that we can't answer with a CHE design, especially about, early life exposures and later development of disease and things that just will never get the information we need from a CHE study. So really highlighting the unique contribution of the EPI studies with a word like unique or something similar.
That's helpful. And I like I might even broaden it to not just focus on CHE studies, but the idea of EPI studies can answer questions that you can't answer with other study designs. I mean, more broadly, I think we can say that. I think that would be a good insertion for this paragraph. I thought I saw another hand up, but it seems to have disappeared. So is that enough? We don't have the sentence well written yet, but we would add something like what Catherine just said. They're unique in their ability to answer questions that can't be answered with other study designs. Mark.
I pause a little bit at adding the word unique, just thinking about, you know, all the different kinds of epi studies. And you could say that every type of study design is unique in its own way. So
Yep.
I wouldn't add unique. Leanne, I liked the sentence that you added about, you know, the epi studies can answer questions that can't be answered with other study designs. So I think that would be a reasonable thing to add.
Okay, so Mark's suggesting striking the word unique and saying epi studies can answer questions that can't be answered with other study designs. Is that going to do it? We do need to do more. It's a little bit hard to think about what text to add when you're not sitting quietly on your own. And we're all sort of engaged in the meeting. So I recognize that I've got it flagged so that we can try to circle back in case anybody has any additional insights while we're other topics. Oh, a couple more hands just went up. Maybe we'll get some more resolution. And Catherine, your hand's up, but I think it's still up, right? Jennifer.
Yeah, I can write a sentence and send it during the meeting if that's helpful, so that we can consider it and can circle back.
Yes, thank you.
Have we finalized the discussion on 30 to 31, the end of that sentence?
No, I don't think we have. And I'd have to go back to my notes. I don't know if somebody is in a position to summarize where we landed last. We've been focusing more on the previous paragraph and the beginning of this paragraph.
I think I started by saying just remove the entire clause at the end, leading to possible determinations. And then there were other suggestions that we should just wordsmith that to keep something there to conclude.
Yes. And does anybody remember what the wordsmith suggestion was now?
I don't remember what the wordsmith suggestion was because we kind of jumped up and started talking about 16 and 17, but I'm thinking that it can, in the new sentences that Jennifer is writing up, to include how epidemiologic studies identify associations and put that up there. And then we also want it to include how that's important for the body of evidence for causality, or we don't want to say anything like that.
Yeah, and I see others are jumping in here. I'll just say I think I understand what you're saying, Christina, and your suggestions. So I can talk about how the associations observed in the epidemiologic studies can be used can be considered when evaluating causality determinations.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for offering to do that. I really appreciate it. Jim.
Yeah, I guess one thing I had thrown out there was the last part of the sentence, leading to possible biases in ozone effects. I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that was right. That reminds me what so maybe Jennifer, in your adding a sentence, you could look at the whole rest of the paragraph as well, and whether we want to use Jim's suggestion or some other rewrite. Mike.
Yeah, I just wanted to. Jeremy had, I think, made a suggestion about line 28, putting in, however, they have limited ability to address confounding variables. I want to make sure that didn't get lost.
Thank you. Thank you. We've wandered around a bit, so I appreciate that. That was on line 28. So that can be part of Jennifer's assignment too. Jeremy.
Just very quickly, I think that I hear Jim's point about adding the term bias in, but that has actually very specific meaning epidemiologically as well. So I would probably, maybe there's another term that doesn't have those same implications.
Yeah, and we're going to let Jennifer figure that out.
No problem. Yeah. And, look, I understand that this can be seen as being nitpicking here, but I mean, if we do think about it, the question of the relative weight of CHE versus EPI studies, I mean, that was the central theme in most of the charge questions. And actually, I should add, was raised by almost all the public comments yesterday. So I'm sorry that we're spending so much time on these minutiae here, but I think it really is one of the most important topics that we discussed during these meetings.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with you. It is probably one of the most important topics. So I think with that, in principle, we're ready to move on from this section. I wanted to note and highlight, and it made it past Mark, who made this really important point that crystallized for me yesterday, but I wanted to highlight the wording that I added on line 39. A second consideration, one particularly relevant for the PA, is how to use CHE studies to characterize health effects at low concentrations. Because what I hadn't really fully understood until yesterday was there's sort of these two issues with controlled human exposure studies. One is the relative weighting that we've been talking about at some length now. And the other is how it gets used for determining policy at low levels. And I didn't hear anybody object to this, and this the draft went by Mark okay. So I'm assuming it's all right. I just wanted to bring it up before we leave this topic to make sure that nobody has any heartburn over it. Okay, hearing none, I think we're ready to move on to the next topic, with the caveat that we're actually coming back to this one more time when we hear Jennifer's proposed change. All right, so we're an hour and a half into the meeting, and I think we only have one more flag. No, we have two more flag topics. The next one was one that George Allen was asked that he generously agreed when he was volunteered by me to take this on, although I think Aaron did most of the heavy lifting in the end. But let's see, we are on the cardiovascular section, at least first. We're on the sentence that it starts on, I think, on line 25 to 27 on page 7. Right, George?
Right.
Okay, and I don't think we have anything in writing from you, so maybe you could just tell us.
Sure. I mean, it was an email to you and Aaron, but nothing to the group. But it was actually much simpler than I first thought, and Aaron gave me a good assist. So the page 7, lines 25 to 27, the wording becomes, this is in response to Mark's comment of, wait a minute, something's missing here. So it becomes other CASAC, or we add, I guess we should say, some kind of yep. So line 24 ends talking about, and stays as it is, some CASAC members agree that EPA's decision to change the short-term ozone cardiovascular effects causality determination from likely to suggestive of, but not sufficient, is reasonable and appropriate. Then we're going to, in the original October 25th, there are some lines that get deleted, and we add on line 25 after reasonable and appropriate, we add other CASAC members do not agree with EPA's decision to change the short-term causality determination from likely to suggestive due to an overemphasis of CHE studies over epidemiological studies. Further details are provided in the health effects overarching comments section above. So that one was short and sweet and clear. Any comments, issues with that edit?
Michael.
Yeah, given that, does that have any implications for the policy assessment? Since if something was downgraded to that extent, would it have dropped off the map on policy?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a sidebar question, but the answer is yes. I mean, as has been noted before, there's a chasm between suggestive and likely. Suggestive endpoints don't get much attention. They might get mentioned, but they don't get a lot of attention in the PA. The likely and causal, likely, causal, and causal get full attention. They get much more, they're the ones that matter in terms of the PA. So there's a huge, that's why we keep fighting over this, is it suggestive or likely? Because in the PA, it makes a difference. So that's why we're.
But in fact, we don't have consensus, and we're not asking them to reopen the ISA. And so it doesn't really have implications for the PA in the sense that I think without consensus about suggestive to likely, it's not changing anything with respect to the
right. I mean, it would, in a normal process, it would. In this process, since I don't know where we're going, I don't know what it means. But for the record, going forward, this is what we're doing for the existing ISA. That make any sense?
Yeah, it does. But then should we, or do we have a feeling that this should be revisited in future ISAs?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. There's a big chunk of, unless Ed's trailer studies did some cardiovascular health endpoints, which I don't think they did because we weren't thinking that way back in the 80s. I don't think there's much, and maybe there's none. I don't know. Others can fill in here where these kinds of trailer or panel ambient air studies, not controlled human exposure studies, were done with where there were cardiovascular markers, either blood or HRV or whatever. And that's, to me, that's the big gap that we're missing in these panel studies. Ed, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just to clarify, George, the only heart cardiovascular endpoints that were utilized in our studies were tracking for ECG, but no blood workups and no heart rate variability at the time.
Yep. Yeah, you were worried about hurting people.
Yeah. or PVCs or other sorts of problems.
Yep.
Okay. So I think we are good with that change. Thank you for that, George. And it looks like you are up next for the next one, which
I am, and I was confused yesterday about, this is page 8, line 7 through 12. 7, 8 is the question. And I was confused yesterday about this, and I remain confused per my email to Aaron and you, Leanne. And this section is long-term cardiovascular effects The question part B says, what are the panel's views regarding the weighting of CHE and EPI studies? But CHE, is not, it's a short-term.
Yeah, so I want to clarify that the way that document is written now, A is about the causality determinations. And I think it was partly my edits. We split it up and talked first about short term and then about long term. And then B is a distinct question. So it's not part of the long term.
Oh.
So.
Okay. Well, that explains a lot.
Yeah, and maybe maybe we were confused about that yesterday.
Well, I certainly was.
Yeah, and maybe this is okay the way it is, and maybe we might need to change it to some CASAC members are concerned, because I don't think all of us have the same conclusion about the relative weighting for the short term.
Right, and in fact, Aaron had suggested some text, the same concept. Some members think there was an overweighting of CHE studies with regards to changing the changing of the short-term cardiovascular effects causality determination. And further details are provided in overarching comments. So, I mean, in that, Leanne, thank you for clarifying the headings here related to the questions. I did not see that at all. So I'm happy with, going with what Aaron suggested based upon our discussion yesterday, saying that, some, not instead of the whole CASAC, some are concerned.
Okay, so we'll just add some to that text, and that will.
Yep, some CASAC members are concerned.
All right, so that addresses that, and I think we've got one, okay. Aaron flagged something for me to ask you about, so on the total mortality, long-term ozone and total mortality, the paragraph that starts on line 16, the CASAC notes that there is relatively strong epidemiologic evidence for long-term ozone exposure and increased cardiovascular mortality.
I'm sorry, which page here?
I'm sorry, I probably skipped that. Page 9.
Oh.
Let me back up. I don't want to, I know how hard it is to keep on top of all these documents and all these places. So page 9, the paragraph line 16 to 19. The CASAC notes there's relatively strong epidemiologic evidence for long-term ozone exposure and increased cardiovascular mortality. Since cardiovascular mortality is the main driver of total mortality, the CASAC agrees with EPA that there is good justification to keep those causal determinations consistent with each other. But in fact, some of us disagreed with the causal determination for the long-term cardiovascular. So I guess the question is there any change needed to this? I could argue that there isn't, because whether we agree with the EPA's conclusion about long or short term, I think my sense is we had consensus that we agreed that there was good justification to draw the same conclusion. Now, one could be, the other perspective is that you might, even though the long-term mortality is driven by cardiovascular, with total mortality, we don't always pay attention to mechanism the same way that we might for cardiovascular mortality. So one of the weaknesses of the cardiovascular mortality evidence is it's not backed up by the morbidity evidence. And so do we bring that into our long-term thinking, and do we have different points of view, or do we just agree that they should be that whatever our points of view, that the two determinations should be the same, which is what this sentence in my mind says.
Let me ask a question of Mark. In terms of respiratory mortality, I assume that's a small chunk of the pie to the point that it's, in this context, maybe negligible. But Mark, you're the expert on that one.
Well, I'm really not the expert on these mortality determinations, but it definitely is smaller than cardiovascular, but it's not infinitesimal, and it does contribute to total mortality. But I think for it to overwhelm cardiovascular, in order for it to really determine total mortality, you'd have to have a substantial signal in the respiratory mortality, more than what we're seeing.
Right. That's my understanding. So in that context, I think that, I would think that both cardiovascular and total in terms of this, in this context, ought to be in the same category, whatever that category should be.
All right. And that was my interpretation. So based on your comment and my interpretation, there's actually no change needed to this.
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Because it's not like some think one thing and some think the other. We all agree that there's good justification for them to have the same categories, whatever the category is.
Right.
Which we don't say, but I think that's implicit and acceptable. Okay. So moving on, what else is flagged? I think we're up next is Jeremy. Yeah, so Jeremy, it's the section on ventilation that was in the at-risk community. Just for everybody, it was in the text on page 12, lines 19 to 24. I had proposed moving it, Jeremy, and proposed putting it back with a revision, which he's now going to share with us and discuss.
Yeah, so I'm just, right. So what I did was I changed the text that I hope makes it more, makes its inclusion in the main body a bit more sensible. What we wanted to say with ventilation originally was that, that's actually an exposure factor by which certain at-risk communities are exposed to differences in ozone, and that should explicitly be addressed in future ISAs as for lack of a better term, the exposure mechanism that could confer added risk within the communities.
Thank you. So this is the proposed text, and hopefully people had a chance to read it. Otherwise, we could read it out loud now, or you can read it yourselves, and we should decide whether we think it's a fine change. It's a relatively speaking, it's a minor point because it's not going to have big implications for the current review. Mark.
Yeah, just a very minor edit. The sentence structure of the first part of the first sentence there is a little inconsistent. I would suggest changing it to residential ventilation is an ozone exposure factor and is correlated.
Good suggestion.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to assume that that's it on this. And Jennifer, are you in a place that we can revisit the probably most important, one of the most important parts, the Ed's rewrite and your suggested addition? Oh, there you go. Your hand's up. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I need 2 more minutes.
Okay.
like
All
2 more
right.
sentences.
Unless Christina has some other suggestion, maybe we should take a break and give Jennifer a little time to think without having to listen to us. You have something else you want to say, Christina?
I just wanted to ask, I see in this paragraph that it says recommends, and if everyone agrees that, because recommends is a stronger language versus suggests.
Oh, in Jeremy's paragraph?
Jeremy's paragraph, yeah.
Okay. Is that okay, Jeremy, to just change from recommends to suggest?
I'm okay with it.
We don't have to change it. I just wanted to see if recommends is what everyone agrees to, because I'm not sure, given past discussion, if that was what it was.
Well, we may not have had as much time to think about it because there's a lot of changes that we're trying to absorb at once.
So I think that the difference in the language here that you're seizing on, Christina, is that the previous time where we use the suggests or may want to look at language was really dealing with an issue that was hypothetical or possible. Whereas maybe here, I think the work that's been done, the research that's been done, no one argues that ventilation can lead to disparity in ozone exposure. So it probably should be addressed within this context as a factor that could confer added risk within specific communities. But I'm not adamant one way or the other, honestly.
Well, I agree with that as well. So the keep recommend is fine with me.
All right, let's keep recommend then. It sounds like there was a really thoughtful and sound basis for recommending it. And so, okay. So I think we're going to take a break, and that will give Jennifer a little time to think, and we all need a break because we've been at this for 2 hours anyway. So I'm hoping 5 minutes is enough. My clock would say 56. And we'll see you back.
Oh, good. We got all the shredding done. The shredder guy came. Shredder guy came.
Okay, we're back from break, or at least I am. I hope it was long enough for folks. I think we can still get through our meeting in time. We only, the consensus comments, excuse me, the letter to the administrator is just distilled from our consensus comments. So hopefully that will go faster than some of this other material that's been super important has. Jennifer, are you, oh, good. You're going to share your screen. Okay, so.
Yeah, if we think now I can't see if everyone's back, but if you think we should just get started.
I think you can go ahead and start. Michelle's saying hi, and presumably we've got our other epidemiologists on as well. So.
Good. So I did just kind of, based on our conversation, took a look at the entire section again, just to make sure it was consistent and had flow throughout, thinking about what we had focused on during our discussions, making it clear that we were weighing all the strengths and limitations of the different study designs. So you should be able to see my changes highlighted in red. And I'll just point out some of the things that we had talked about.
Can you make it bigger?
I sure can. Good?
Excellent.
So highlighted is one of the phrases that we had talked about that should be considered. I actually inserted something here that an introductory sentence introducing this topic, that these are some of the strengths and weaknesses that we can consider for the purposes of causality determinations. And then I added here, just to describe why the CHE study design is such a strong design in terms of causal conclusions. I added this descriptor that's highlighted because of the randomizing controlled design. I also inserted well conducted, because we all know that, if you're not conducting it well, that this wouldn't be applicable. Here is the phrasing that we talked about that can contribute to causality conclusions when thinking about the CHE. I just clarified some of the wording about the CHE study design, what they can and can't do. And then added here, but this approach limits the potential relevance of any findings to the general population and may limit the evidence. I think I was just trying to close out this sentence here to kind of take it back to why we were talking about this design. So is everybody okay with this? I was trying to make sure it had the strengths and the weaknesses highlighted, and that all of this can be considered when we're thinking about evidence from CHEs for causal determinations.
So I see Michael has his hand up. It's probably good to pause on this paragraph and get it finished before we go next. So Michael.
Yeah, I just was wondering whether there's a better way to phrase that last bit, may limit evidence from contributing.
Oh, sorry.
So
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure, what else to say, but
I have an
maybe a
idea.
limitation or,
I have an idea. May limit how evidence from controlled human exposure studies contribute to causal determination. Either how or how much. Maybe how much is better because we kind of know how. Does that address that, Michael?
yeah, make it, I
That
don't
is
know how
elite
much.
To
Yeah,
what degree?
Yeah.
The degree to which, or yeah, to what degree?
Or just should be considered?
Well, this approach limits the potential relevance.
How about, and that may limit the contribution of CHE findings in causality determination.
Fine, yeah.
yeah, that's good.
Okay. Those two hands are addressing this point. I'm not seeing any more hands. So I think we're ready to move on to the next paragraph.
Okay. Here I tried to frame it in a similar format to the CHE paragraph with an introductory sentence. Epidemiologic studies like CHEs have advantages and limitations for causal determination. Epidemiologic studies often include a wider range of study participants, including populations that may not be feasible to study in a CHE design. I gave some examples that we talked about, or participants who may not participate. That doesn't sound right. So people who may not participate in CHEs, this idea of who is actually volunteering. And then further, epidemiologic studies can evaluate longer-term exposure and exposure to the real-world complex ambient mixture, as well as outcomes that are more delayed in nature. However, epidemiologic studies may be limited in their ability to address and minimize confounding, including this I need to work on, including some confounding by complaint exposures and socioeconomic differences and potential selection and information bias. So this is where I think we need to find a better ending again to this paragraph. If everyone's okay with the previous.
Well, maybe it should be echo sort of the way we ended the CHE paragraph about limiting the contribution of their findings to causality determinations, because that's kind of what.
So here, maybe.
Yeah, that looks good to me so far. I see Ed has his hand up. Did you want to chime in?
Yeah,
about-
just a small point. If you could go back up, Jennifer, to where you changed the people.
Yep.
Let's say here. Yeah, in line 33. It's a small point, but I think it sounds better to me rather than people who may not participate in CHEs, that you have participants who may not volunteer.
But then they're not participants.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was
I
avoiding.
guess that's true, but
prospective participants or individuals who may not volunteer.
And I think it's an issue of volunteering, but also who's recruited, who is eligible, right? It
Okay,
includes.
so volunteering's maybe too narrow.
Yeah.
Is that it, Ed, or did you have more?
yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, that.
Well, it's the same issue with participants in the latter part of the sentence there.
Yeah.
Christina.
Yeah, so this is really great. Thank you for doing this. I was just thinking on line 40, perhaps taking out socio-demographic differences, because I believe that elsewhere we're saying that there needs to be more studies that including like diverse populations. But here we're saying that they don't really handle socio-demographic differences well. And so I just wonder if we can take this out and have this example by co-pollutant exposure seems sufficient.
Yeah, and it is an example. So, you didn't actually put it, it's no longer in parentheses, but that's not necessarily a problem, but it's fine. Terry had his hand up.
Just in this rewrite, so there's a couple places where lines 38 and 40 now have confounding. And the same thing in line 41 and 42. We had contributions and contributions. It was a little confusing.
All right, well, we can wordsmith,
Yeah.
wordsmith those details to make sure that we don't have the repetition. As long as the points are captured appropriately.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to insert myself, but I do want to ask Catherine to make sure that she thinks the point she made, which I had on the front of my mind, but it's gone, is adequately captured in this edit. So maybe you could think about that, Catherine, while I call on Michael.
Yeah, just on line 34, one more participants that need to be changed to individual.
Oh.
Yeah, I think I was just going to say, I really appreciate your work on this, Jennifer, and it does capture, I was concerned about being able to point out explicitly those, strengths and advantages. And I like the embellishment with some examples here, and capturing that longer term, outcomes that are questions that just can't be answered in CHE. So I think it does a nice job of that.
Okay. Yeah, and it was that explicit questions that can't be answered wording that I guess I didn't see, and maybe that doesn't matter because it's implicit here. It may not be feasible to study. Okay, that's kind of saying the same thing. Sure. Thank you for pointing that out. Jim.
Yeah, I just had a clarification question. where it says, and by potential selection and information bias. Can you explain what is meant by that? On line 40, I'm sorry, line 41.
Yeah, so I thought it was incomplete. Epidemiology can be limited by confounding bias, but also by selection and information bias, right? So these can be, depending on the design, these can manifest in different ways, but all could lead to an answer that it may not be correct, that may be biased. So just different types of bias. So in terms of selection being related, for example, in a case control study that might be related to both exposure and disease status, that would change your answer. Or information bias that might be inappropriate or invalid assignment of the exposure based on residential address, that might lead to information bias that could give you an incorrect answer.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I think I don't see any more hands up, so I'm going to assume that we can move on to the next paragraph. It looks like you have a few changes there too.
So here, I think I was just, again, trying to make it consistent throughout. CASAC suggested consideration of the various study designs on their own merit, and then highlighted just the interpretation to arrive at the most informed interpretation given the study's strengths and uncertainties. So this is where I do think that this is a bit duplicative, because I think Ed did have both of these points that you were trying to point out, Leanne, that the two ways in which CHEs can contribute information. So I kind of clarified both of those reasons. That the approach is relevant when interpreting evidence for causality determinations, and also to help identify and establish the exposure levels associated with adverse health effects.
Okay, I wonder if we should edit line 53 instead of saying a second consideration, which sort of implies something new, but something like the latter consideration. Or something like that, to imply that it was just in the previous sentence.
Yeah, I think that would help the flow. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Really helpful. Thank you for doing this. We couldn't have done this as a group on the fly. Really needed somebody to go through the text and work on it, and really appreciate that.
One minor correction. The latter consideration, one particularly relevant to the PA, relates to instead of is how.
Oh,
or something of that nature.
Okay, thanks. And Jim, you had your hand up.
Yes, I guess I'm trying to understand, does this replace in the original document, we had a paragraph 20 on page 4, lines 25 to 30, and I'm wondering if this includes that replacement, or is that old paragraph of 25 to 30 still going to be in the document, response?
The way that I understood it is the paragraph as edited yesterday on lines 25 through 30 would, I think, be kept. Let me go back. Thank you for asking that question. And Ed, please chime in if you have a different understanding. So we edited that paragraph yesterday. We kept the first sentence. Then we added, since the ISA did not discuss the concentration or health impacts of related photochemical oxidants relative to ozone alone, and the significance of these differences is unknown, future reviews should thoroughly examine this topic.
Mhm.
And then the last sentence that starts further was edited a little bit to end with, instead of talking about no effect, was to replace that with no adverse effects. So,
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that that was still in the response. So thank you.
yes. So I think that's the intent, is that
Mhm.
this document that we just reviewed replaces everything in the overarching comments section from the beginning up to that paragraph that we just discussed, which starts on line 25. So everything up to line 25 on page 4, we just discussed, and thanks to, in particular, to Ed and Jennifer, I think we have consensus on that now. We can, further wordsmithing, you will see this draft document, a little wordsmithing details we can still take care of offline. So, but the meaning I think we've got now. So thank you for everyone for your contributions on that. And I think we're ready to go to the letter, just to make sure it's clear to everyone. The first 2 paragraphs of the letter are intended to also be the first 2 paragraphs of the consensus responses, and we did not discuss those yesterday. They were new additions that I had proposed over the weekend that was made public on Monday morning. And so my intent was to discuss them now as part of the letter. So unless there's anything else to bring up with respect to the consensus comments, my intent is to start with that. I'm not seeing any hands. So let's see. And for this, is there somebody that I'd rather not do it if I don't have to. Is there somebody, because it's a lot of text, maybe even though people had it since yesterday, can Will or Aaron or somebody share the screen for that first page of my preliminary comments that were made public yesterday?
Well, can you do that?
And while we're getting that together, the first paragraph, so this is in the letter, and there's no page numbers on the letter. So I actually wrote page numbers on the bottom of mine, and I also wrote paragraph numbers and in order to create this document. So you might want to recognize that in your own review. So the first page of the letter, currently the paragraph that starts on line 25 through 31, I'm proposing a replacement. The replacement is more complete history. So I don't think there's much there to really discuss. Oh, Michelle put it up. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Okay. So I don't know that these details need, this is more thorough background, which seemed, particularly given this reconsideration, that we needed to make sure that we covered that. So unless there's further discussion, I think the second paragraph is going to need more, potentially more discussion. So we're moving to that now. That's lines 33 through 39. There's a new replacement paragraph. And some of the things, and actually the public commenters asked for this, so I was happy that I'd done it before they asked for it. We explicitly say now on line 26, the CASAC is not recommending the 2020 ISA, which is a final document, be reopened and revised, but does offer advice for consideration in future reviews. And I note that it says future reviews. So my interpretation of future reviews means certainly future ISAs. And as EPA chooses to use its judgment, it could also impact the reconsideration. So, and then I think the next sentence was probably already in there. Overall, we think the document's well written. And we also continue to acknowledge the accelerated timeline, which may have contributed from the past ISA. And then that we explicitly state the evidence summarized in the 2020 ISA provides a scientifically sound foundation for the reconsideration. And then the last sentence is that we acknowledge that we don't always have the same judgments that the EPA reached. That we have some differing opinions about that. So that's what that paragraph says. This will appear both in the letter and at the beginning of the consensus comments. I'm not proposing that they be any different. So I'm not seeing any hands. Does that mean that everybody's okay with that text? That's awesome. Appreciate that. Then in that case, I think we're moving on to the letter paragraph 3, and I'm going to go back up. So thanks to Aaron, I see Jason has his hand up. So before I move on, I'll take Jason. But before I do that, I'll just say that Aaron went through and pulled into the consensus comments everything we talked about yesterday. And so I have draft text in a Word document that I am looking at, and I'll try to highlight that as well as the changes that I propose. So we're kind of working across 3 documents, which is a potential source of confusion, and we need to slow down if people get lost. But anyway, Jason.
It might not be relevant, but I was just wondering, the wording here is the CASAC is not recommending that the ISA be reopened and revised. Should we also say that we're not recommending that a new ISA be conducted? I mean, I don't know if that's at all on the table.
Well, I think we say, well, I think that's implied in the sense that we also say that because we're in the middle of a reconsideration. And so we haven't said, and maybe we need to, and you know, we can actually ask EPA to chime in here. We haven't explicitly said we do not recommend that this reconsideration be halted, you know, in favor of like a new review. We do say that it's a sound foundation for the reconsideration, which we're in the middle of. If anyone thinks we need to also say that, I want to hear from them. And that includes EPA. We are scientists, we are not lawyers. And I know that EPA reacts to things based on what lawyers think as well as what scientists think. And we are not in a position to know what lawyers think. So if this needs to very explicitly say that, you know, we are not recommending that the reconsideration be halted, I think we should do that. So I'm waiting for someone to tell me what they think. I'll start with George.
I would suggest we don't explicitly recommend any path of action, and that includes reopening the ISA or canceling the reconsideration. I think those are EPA's decisions. We're, you know, in this particular part of the review, we're going back and looking at the ISA. EPA gets our feedback. What they do with that, whether they choose to modify the ISA in some way or whether they choose to go forward with the PA in some other way, I don't think that's up to us. And I'm not sure we're all that clear. I've heard a lot of feedback, both from the public commenters and folks here, that, you know, we are essentially not suggesting, or maybe we're explicitly suggesting that EPA should not reopen the ISA. I don't know if we want to say that. I'm agnostic on it. I don't, you know, it's not, I don't think it's our decision to say one way or the other. We provide them the advice, and they do with it what they feel is appropriate.
Okay, so we are already proposing in the text we're looking at now, we're already saying that the 2020 ISA does not need to be reopened. Now, that's maybe a little different than starting a new ISA.
Well, it does not need to be, that's saying, it doesn't have to be, but you could.
Okay,
That's not definitive in any way. And I mean, again, my point is I don't think we should be issuing definitive statements on how they proceed in any aspect of this.
okay. Yeah, we're not recommending that it be reopened. We're not saying don't reopen it.
Right.
That's a slight distinction. Okay, and I'm not seeing anybody from EPA stepping up to say anything. So if you're dealing with your lawyers in a way that we as scientists need to be paying attention to, now is your time to speak up. Because we are trying to give you our best scientific advice, and we're not necessarily in a position to know the legal implications of it.
Eileen, I wanted to jump in. I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand while I share screen for some reason.
Why don't you stop sharing screen?
Oh,
anyway?
okay. So I agree with the previous comment. I think that it's nuanced, but I think there's a big difference between us saying we don't find a need to reopen versus saying do not reopen. And I think that the former is more in line with our role. So
Okay.
I think that would be reasonable language to use.
Okay, and I actually see Karen turned on her video, so maybe Karen wants to tell us something that would help us.
I think you guys are all on the right path, so I don't know that I need to speak up, but I was just going to say and confirm what you guys have already covered. I mean, I think what we're looking for from CASAC is an understanding of whether you think that the scientific information by which we are doing this reconsideration is fundamentally flawed. And you think that there are issues that we need to go back and address. And it sounds like that's not where you were headed, and you were saying it is not fundamentally flawed, and therefore it is appropriate to move forward with the scientific information and using it for this reconsideration. And so if that is the conclusion, then one would conclude that, opening up the ISA and redoing it is not necessary.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful, just to help us understand where we're at. Let's see. So now I think, unless I don't see any more hands, I think we're on to letter paragraph 3, which starts on line 41 of the first page and ends on line 4 of the second page. So there's several proposed edits that I made. Line 41 to include such as wildfires after exceptional events. Make sure that I'm I've been seeing that on exceptional events on that line. So, line 42, that's a mistake. So line 42, such as wildfires. Yesterday, we added in a future review. Also on that line, however, in a future review, it should clearly state, maybe I should share this screen. Since there's a lot of details. Okay, people seeing that, and I'll make it a little bigger. Okay, this didn't get added yet. And then based on our discussion yesterday, we also changed it to alternatively, the EPA could also present the data both with and without. And then on the next paragraph, there was a sentence based on
Excuse me, Leanne.
Yes.
In the previous correction you just made, I think you added exceptional events.
Whoops. You must be wildfires. Thank you. Yeah, and we're working through across several documents which have been edited differently. So you know, keep me on track. The line 44, we're replacing the sentence that's in the 1025 document that says the ISA should discuss. It now says a future ISA should discuss how the treatment of exceptional events, well, it got changed yesterday from what I put in my letter to say how treatment of exceptional event designations are handled in the EPA ozone measurement databases used in epidemiology studies and exposure assessments, and whether there is a potential for bias. That takes us all the way to the end and deletes a sentence that was in the original document on the second page. Any further comments on that third paragraph? Okay, seeing none. We're moving on to the fourth paragraph, which are on the final document or is on lines 5 to 18. We're suggesting revising the second sentence, which it looks like we didn't discuss yesterday, so it's not in the version I'm showing you. Starting on line 7. So maybe I'll do this on the fly. Okay, so the scientific evidence suggests that ozone exposures in the ambient environment and CHE study exposures are different since the ambient environment includes photochemical oxidants.
Leanne, I think you might have simple markup being shown instead of all markup. So it doesn't show all the deletions or they're off to the side, so not everyone can see it.
Okay, so let me see. Review. All markup, it says markup options. And it may be off to the side. Okay, let me make it a little smaller. It does still looks like this wasn't changed from what was suggested in my text. This needs to be yeah. And then there was also text about assignment versus generation, which I think we addressed yesterday. I think that's this text that was addressed.
Leanne, when you're done, I had some suggested edits for what you just added on line 7, but I can wait if you're done. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm just checking to see what else. I think that's it for this paragraph. So Jeremy, you can go ahead and propose.
Okay, I can just share my screen briefly if you want to.
Okay. Oh, I guess I need to stop. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Where the heck is my control? Zoom. Oh, there it is. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so this was, yeah, so I added this. I think this was what you had added, what I just in the strikeout here. And I added what's highlighted here. So they serve as different indicators of human exposure to total photochemical oxidants and corresponding toxicity. Although there are similarities among the observed ozone-related health effects in each of these study settings, key uncertainties associated with each of these indicators may obscure true concordance in the exposure response relationship. So I think that there are questions about whether or not the exposure to pure ozone in controlled settings were appropriate, or they really truly reflected the totality of oxidants that are in the ambient atmosphere. But I kind of added in saying, well, but also there are limitations in using ozone measured at a stationary site too, in that they may not capture.
So this is to replace just that one sentence with now two, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's where
that's
where I would put it. But
yeah, I'm typing it in and I'll share it. And thanks for reminding me earlier this morning. There was a little too much going on to address this. So I'm glad you brought it up.
just let me know when I can stop sharing it.
Okay, I think I got it, other than whatever typos ended up in my text. So I'll go back to sharing, and I see, is your point, Mark, is this about this point, or is this related?
It is, yeah. I mean, I think Jeremy's edit, I agree with it, but I think it's not as clear. I think it would be better to explicitly describe that what we're talking about is the difference between pure ozone in the chamber and ozone plus these unknown photochemical oxidants. And what I was going to add to the sentence that you had in there was you had, I think your sentence ended with photochemical oxidants. Your sentence is gone now. You needed to say photochemical oxidants other in addition to ozone.
Okay. So how are we going to address this?
So I guess I like the way you were going initially with the edit to this.
All right, so let's see where, this is the text that Jeremy added right here. I'll highlight it in yellow. I think that's it, right, Jeremy? So my text was ended here, and then is this crossed out text here. And I just added your in addition to ozone in the crossed out part, just to keep it straight.
I mean, Jeremy, I mean, I agree with your edit here. I think it's an accurate description. It seems less clear to me, probably because my mind is pretty simple.
No, I agree. I think it's more difficult to understand. I mean, there's some way to say it's simpler, and I think Leanne says it's simpler.
Yeah, I think those are valid points. Yeah.
So I think now we're talking about keeping this.
Well,
And
maybe putting that back up, right? What you had. Okay, so The scientific evidence suggests that ozone exposures in the ambient environment and CHE study exposures are different since the ambient environment includes photochemical oxidants in addition to ozone. Okay. As such, the CASAC advocates a cautious approach. Yeah, I think that would be fine. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so we're gonna leave it as is with this yellow highlighted crossed out is what I'm hearing.
I think I looked at the document that actually had your change, but it was outside of the context of this complete paragraph. So now that I read on, yeah, that doesn't really add much, whatever.
Okay, so this is the proposed edited paragraph, including changes that Aaron, which are now showing on the side, that Aaron incorporated from our discussion yesterday. Oh, Mark, you have your hand up.
Not
It's
anymore.
Mike.
Okay, Michael.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it would be too much specificity to say includes photochemical oxidants, for example, reactive oxygen species and reactive nitrogen species, in addition to ozone.
I mean, I think that's in our more detailed comments. I don't think it's necessary to add here, but I don't feel strongly.
My feeling is that if we want to insert it, we should go back and put it in the consensus comments if it's not there. And not add that detail in the letter. Does that people agree with that?
Yes, I agree. I think this
Yeah.
is it's the overarching letter. And the detail should be in the back consensus.
Yeah, so I'll flag that. Aaron, will you take a note and make sure that we've got the for instance, reactive, you said for instance, right, Michael, reactive ozone and nitrogen species.
Yes.
We'll make sure that's presumably in this section in the other part. And if it's not, we'll put it in there in a reasonable place. It's just a clarification of what we mean by photochemical oxidants. And that belongs there. Okay, are we done with this paragraph then? Now the next paragraph, so this one we need to update based on Ed's edit, which was edited by Jennifer, which I don't think we can really do on the fly right now. I think we've got two paths. One is we get somebody to try to figure it out and we vet it in public. The other is, trust me that I can distill that into something coherent for this letter. But I don't know if that violates anything. Aaron can weigh in on that.
Because the content's all there, we're just summarizing it. So I think that's fine if everyone agrees that they trust your summarization.
Okay, and let me see what else I have. So that's based on this. I'll just put okay to update later from finalized consensus comments. Let's see, this paragraph. We also had, where are we? This is paragraph 5. We had inserted on line 29 ozone, that's a detail. On line 33, after effects, long-term effects or represent realistic exposure scenarios. I'm just reading this out loud, what I had proposed over the weekend. And then line 34, the CASAC finds that for reaching causality conclusions, the 2020 ISA places too much reliance upon controlled human exposure studies, but this is going to be edited. So I think both what I proposed on line 33 and line 34 will be updated based on the new draft. And I guess the point that Aaron flagged here is just that this paragraph actually includes sort of information from the respiratory section and also information from the overarching comments section. And so I think partly because of how the two documents were created and edited, it doesn't flow quite the same as it did in the consensus comments. And that's another thing that Aaron and I can do, is to make sure that the flow mirrors what's in the consensus comments, which I don't think it completely does right now.
So just to clarify, that first half of the highlighted paragraph there, in the consensus responses, that's from the respiratory section, discussion point C. But in an earlier draft, it was combined and before it got merged into the overarching comments. So that's still in the consensus response respiratory section. So what we can do is, if everyone agrees, is we can move that chunk out of this overarching section and put it with the respiratory. And then this whole paragraph would just be a distillation of Ed's revised thing for the overarching.
Okay. So that's our working plan, and I'm not seeing any hands up. So I'm going to go to the next paragraph. It's paragraph 6 on letter page 2 that starts on line 36. And we suggested updating this sentence that starts further. And it looks like we added a sentence before that yesterday, which it appears here. So this came in yesterday. Since the ISA did not discuss the concentration or health impacts of related photochemical oxidants relative to ozone alone, and the significance of these differences unknown, future reviews should thoroughly examine this topic. And then we added for this further one, evaluating ozone health effects at low concentrations and at risk groups. And then we in future reviews. Epidemiologic findings should be considered to be just as or even more relevant than CHE findings in determining an exposure with no meaningful effects, which we changed to no adverse effects. So that we had extensive discussion on that yesterday. And so that's the proposed edits to this paragraph now. Okay. I'm not trying to rush anybody, but I'm going to move on if I don't see hands. And again, the panel we can't make substantive changes, but the panel can certainly vet details after the meeting is over. So paragraph 7, we did a lot of edits on this yesterday. And I had suggested a few. It was all adding in future reviews, which looked like that got inserted here too. So this is this paragraph 7 is substantially rewritten based on our discussion yesterday about the PICO statements. And the reference to future applications. So again, not trying to rush anybody. We didn't have, there were just minor edits to paragraph 8. That's this paragraph here that I'm highlighting. So I don't think there's anything there to discuss unless anybody wants to bring something up. Moving on to paragraph 9, which appears in the letter on page 3, lines 19 to 32. Let's see, what did we? So I had suggested some revisions that may have made it in already yesterday. Doesn't look like it, so I'll read those. And add it on the fly. So some CASAC members concur and others find that the evidence supports likely to be causal relationship. I think this was more for clarity. Those that concur put more weight on uncertainties and inconsistent study results and the relative lack of new studies to address these uncertainties. Oops. Those that do not concur find the evidence supports the likely causal da-di-da-di-da. And then we suggested, this may have been incorporated yesterday, not sure, need to look. That lines 24 to 25, that sentence be deleted, and my guess is it's already out. Yeah, so this is the sentence that Aaron deleted, that we agreed to delete that yesterday. And we made a few other suggestions that are reflected in Aaron's edits from yesterday. Michael.
Yeah, just minor things on line 27. Those who do not concur, take out the word and. Find that the evidence, and then
those that do not concur.
Find that the evidence, and then
thank you.
And then down on line 33, likely to be causal.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I don't see any other hands. So we are going to keep going. We're on letter paragraph number 10. Oh, that's minor edits that were suggested. So I don't think they need discussion. It looks like there were a few that happened yesterday also that Aaron incorporated to letter paragraph 10. Ed, you have your hand up.
Just as a general comment that you can go back and clean up later, it's inconsistent throughout this letter here. Sometimes when you're talking about the causal determination as suggestive, likely, etc., there are quotes around it, and other times it's just laid out there. So either put quotes around them all the time or take them away. But
all right, so we'll clean up the quotes.
Yeah.
Thank you. We will do that. Yeah, I think we have been a little inconsistent about a few things like that. All right, where am I? So we're now in letter paragraph 11. It starts with the CASAC finds. This is about the developmental effects, and we made some changes to that, and And I think, yeah, so we added in a future review that I also suggested in my letter, and then line 13. Looks like we made those changes too, about the consistency and coherence of these findings. Suggested in a future review, the evidence is compelling for reconsideration of the overall causality on lung function and development. So we vetted those yesterday. And there were no additional suggested changes. So I'm going to move on to paragraph 12, which is starts with EPA's treatment. This is line 17 to 23 of the original document, and we had suggested a minor change on line 19 to add however, and let's see, and then a more major change to replace a sentence that was on line 22, and it looks like we didn't actually replace it yesterday. We just edited it. So let's see. Anything here based on what we did yesterday that needs to be changed? The last sentence. I think I had suggested, just so you know, in the document that was shared on Monday morning, I suggested adding, instead of the sentence that starts this type, I had suggested adding, this has made EPA has made considerable progress in its consideration of at-risk populations, and the CASAC looks forward to additional advances in future reviews. We could add that, actually. Doesn't really. Yes, Jeremy.
Just a small change. Line 22, I would say exposure due to spatial variation that is often associated with demographic factors, not driven by those factors.
Okay, I'm going to flag for, well, Aaron, you'll double check that this makes it into the consensus comments too, right? I saw another hand up, but I guess it's disappeared now. So Christina.
Oh, sorry. So the sentence that you just said, Leanne, of adding that sentence before line 23.
Yeah, or after, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to know if it was going to replace it, but adding it's fine.
Well, at the moment, it had suggested replacing it, but then we made edits to this yesterday. So let me put it in and we'll look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, and you did not, after you added associate with, you didn't remove the by.
Oh,
on line 22.
I'll get to that. And that, yeah, that's helpful, but it's in the class of wordsmithing. So let me get this done first. Okay. So that was a sentence that I had proposed adding, and it doesn't seem harmful, and it does laud the EPA for the work that they have done that isn't in some sense showing up in this yet, because it's from 2020 and they've already made a lot more progress even since 2020. So we can add that if people agree. Yes, okay, thank you. So I think we're on to letter paragraph 13, which is on page 4. This is about vegetation and ecosystems. And there were just a couple of edits based on our discussion yesterday, and let's see, where am I? Yeah, so the stuff I sent in advance was, we also discussed at length yesterday. So Terry, your hand's up.
Didn't we also change third?
Oh, yeah, we did that this morning. What did it was consequently or something? I don't remember.
Yeah, consequently, I think.
Yeah, we'll get that right. We'll make it the same. Thank you. All right. So I can't believe it, but we're down to the appendix 9. Letter paragraph 4, and there was just a suggestion to change on lines 37 to 43. That's the first sentence. What did I suggest doing? This on line 38 with global mean surface. I'm not sure I'm following this at the moment, but it must be this.
Leanne, I think
Yes.
you suggested putting in future reviews after where it says temperature be removed from climate variables, that category. I think you said in future reviews. That was
Okay.
one of the edits.
Global mean.
And then it was what? This was supposed to be global mean, right? Am I getting
Global
this
mean
right?
surface temperature, right?
Mean surface, thank you. Anything else that's supposed to be changed in this? We did this one we talked about today. So the edits that we talked about today are not in this document. So we will of course bring anything forward that we might miss in this public conversation, but anybody that notices anything, and I see Ed, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so just in that context, the last sentence in the previous, I think it's line 37 and 38, that we discussed, I think in a conversations led by Jim Boylan, I think we changed actually or added to that last sentence. So again, if we bring forward the discussion from this morning, we'll capture that. I would just suggest to read what we changed.
Okay.
I think it's already in there.
The consideration, is that how we ended up? Consideration of a distinct secondary standard?
I believe so.
Okay, that's fine. Just wanted to check on that.
Okay, that's just got a reminder there. Thank you. Yeah, I thought it was in there too, so that's why I didn't say anything. Well, that's it. And then the last sentence is just like, we appreciate the opportunity to provide advice. Is there anything anybody wants me to go over?
Just Leanne, if you would just scroll back up, I think there was
Sure.
one other minor edit, which is
Absolutely.
right after global mean surface temperature, take out increase. So temperature itself is directly related. Yeah.
Yeah, and we can bring forward anything else. It seemed to me we made a couple other clarifications in Appendix 9 that might be useful to bring into the letter. So we can certainly look at that. And when you all see it, if there's anything, particularly those of you, since this is not my area of expertise, those of you with expertise in this area should certainly bring forward anything that I might have missed. Aaron and I might have missed. From what we discussed earlier, because as you know, as we've said, this letter is a distillation of our consensus comments, and so it should reflect the spirit and the intent of them. So I'm going to stop sharing under the assumption that we don't need to look at this document right now. Is there anything else that we didn't cover? I note that I brought up this morning anything we want to explicitly think should be brought into the ozone consideration that we want to say explicitly. And I don't think we've said too much about that. And I don't know if anybody wants us to address that. I mean, we've in more detail, but I flagged that for opportunity to say anything. And actually, I'm going to step back now and invite EPA if they have anything they want us to say in public. I mean, obviously, they're not going to tell us what to say, but if there's anything they want us to discuss in public that we maybe are saying unintentionally and not realizing it or whatever, I ask you to tell us now, because we're not going to be able to change this unless we schedule yet another public meeting, which I don't expect. Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Leanne, and I'll welcome others from EPA, including OAR, to raise their hand or comment as well. I don't have anything additional. I absolutely appreciate the time you've spent carefully thinking about the language in this letter, and it may seem like an arduous task, but it's definitely very helpful to us to have that clarity. And I think we've gained a lot of improved understanding of exactly what the recommendations are here over the last couple of days. And of course, going back to August and September, the conversations we had with you on the science, I think were hopefully helpful to you. We're appreciate the opportunity to be able to clarify the conclusions that we drew in the 2020 ISA and have these discussions with you over the last few months. So no additional comments from me, but I'd welcome anything from other colleagues on the call.
Karen.
Sure. I would just echo Steve's comments. I don't think we have anything either that we feel like we need to raise at this point. So thank you so much for all of your time and effort these last 2 days.
Okay, yeah, we don't want to leave stones uncovered that leave you all scratching your head about what you're going to do moving forward. I know all of us are waiting on the edge of our seats to figure out what's going to happen next with this reconsideration. This is a pretty uncharted course, and it's certainly, I've found it challenging to navigate every step of the way. And I guess it's the ball, once we finalize this document, I recognize, I guess EPA can't really act on our advice until it's official. So we will make that official as soon as we are able to, in order to keep this reconsideration moving. I think that's our intent, is to keep the reconsideration moving. And I ask EPA to let us know as soon as possible when we can schedule our next meeting, because it takes a while to get all these busy people available at the same time. So even if you are not quite ready to give us anything, we can still get dates on the calendar. And so the sooner we can work on dates, the less delay our availability is going to cause in the process. And that's certainly been a bit of a source of frustration on my part, that way back in June, I thought we would be done with this by September. And here we are almost, we're in the middle of November and we're not quite done yet. So that just says a lot about CASAC's availability. And so in terms of scheduling, we really, if we're going to keep this reconsideration moving, we need to get dates on the calendar sooner rather than later. So I ask EPA to make sure that you pay attention to that in our moving to next steps. Does anybody else have any comments they wish to share? Terry.
I was just curious, Leanne, can you or Aaron guess what the schedule might be and what our next steps might be?
Well, I would turn that over to EPA, and I did invite them to tell us yesterday. I didn't really hear definitive. I think they need our official, I'm speaking for them. I'll let them speak uh, for themselves, but I think they need our official advice in order to make their final decision about what they're going to do next. And that's my understanding. Karen, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, no, yes, I think your understanding is correct. I mean, we do need the official the official final letter so that we can understand what CASAC's advice is and determine next steps. But I think we share your sentiment in wanting to move this along as quickly as possible. So as soon as we have that letter and we understand what the advice is, we will be planning next steps. We also understand how difficult it is to get so many people together at the same time. And so as soon as we have an understanding of what we need to do next, we will quickly get back to you, at least to start polling for dates so we can get that meeting scheduled as efficiently as possible.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Michael.
Yes, in the detailed part, we do make a recommendation of new publications that might be considered with respect to developmental changes. And I'm wondering whether it's we should put a sentence in the letter.
Well, we could, if I recall from the conversation yesterday, we don't see those changes as affecting the policy assessment for the reconsideration. So from that point of view, it may not rise to the importance of the letter. But we can certainly look at bringing that into the letter as long as it's clear that it's not for the reconsideration, it's just for a future scientific review, actually, because we're not talking about it for this next policy assessment review.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Anything else? We're certainly able to end early, and I'm sure some of us would appreciate getting back with our day. I just want to make sure that we haven't left any stone unturned, because we're not going to be able to go back and fix it later. So I'm not seeing anybody else raising their hand or bringing anything up. George, you're waving.
Yes. I just wanted to thank you very much for all of your efforts. This has been a very unusual review. The process has been complicated, and you've juggled an awful lot of bits and pieces, and I don't think you've dropped many or any of them on the floor. So I just want to acknowledge your efforts. I know it's really, really hard work. It takes a lot of energy to be, on for, 4 hours straight, 2 days in a row. Not to mention the time and energy you spend, outside of the meeting. So I just wanted to thank you very much for everything you've done.
Here, here.
Oh, Aaron reminded me I forgot something in the agenda. Well, that's what I need people to help me do. And thank you very much, George. I have to say, I wasn't planning on spending my Veterans Day holiday weekend working on CASAC business, but that's what happened. But it needed to happen in order to have this meeting not go off the rails. So Aaron reminds me, and I didn't go back and remind myself of the agenda, but we have one last topic on our agenda, and that is the official chartered CASAC disposition of the draft report. So for this, we need the people who are currently on the chartered CASAC to vote to approve the report as revised, and so that we can get that on the record. So I see people turning on their videos, and thank you for doing that. And I'm going to do this from memory. Let's see if I forget anybody. So Michelle, do you concur with the report as revised?
Yes.
Thank you. Christina, you're next on my screen.
Yes.
Thank you. Oops, I skipped Mark. He was first. Mark.
Yes.
Thank you, Alexandra. Oops, I know. Okay, go ahead, Alexandra.
Yes.
Okay, Jim.
Yes.
I guess people can't see what I can see in terms of the order on the screen, so it doesn't matter anyway. And Judy.
Yes.
Okay, I think I got everybody. Speak up now if I forgot you. Yeah, well, Catherine, you're not on chartered CASAC, so I'm happy you approved, but your voice in this particular moment is not what I'm looking for. Thank you, everybody, for your work. I think now, if I haven't forgotten anything, I think it's time to turn the meeting back over to Aaron to adjourn.
Hey, thank you, everyone. I think we had a very productive discussion. I'll be in contact with action items. I think we resolved most of the action items. I don't think anyone's really charged with giving us much text. So the next steps are Leanne and I will clean this all up, and you will see a revision compared with the October 25th version. So you'll be able to see all the changes. And then what we will ask you by email is just to confirm that all the revisions reflect the discussions that took place these last 2 days. But at this stage, since everyone's already voted and everyone's agreed, we're not looking for any new revisions other than clarity or if something does not reflect what was discussed. And then with that, then we will then transmit that back to EPA. So with that, thank you everyone again. Thank you EPA. Thank you public commenters, and we can be dismissed.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.